Sometimes the strongest guardians come in the smallest shapes. A boy with haunted eyes and 5 loyal dogs, standing together against a town gripped by fear and misunderstanding. In Cedar Hollow, legends are born not from grand gestures, but from quiet courage, second chances, and the healing power of friendship. Would you trust a child to lead a pack of giants, or let old wounds shape your heart forever? Tell us, what would you have done? Share your thoughts below, and stay with us as this unforgettable journey unfolds. The best is yet to come. The sun had barely begun its cautious ascent above the jagged peaks when Cedar Hollow awakened beneath a winter haze. A thin, icy fog clung to the narrow streets, blurring the boundaries between Pine and Porch Mountain and home. Snow still frosted the rooflines and the tips of ancient spruce, though late February promised a spring not far away. This was Colorado's high country, where the air held both the chill of old secrets and the crisp hope of another morning. At the far end of Main Street, the Miller house huddled beneath a leaning blue spruce, its wooden siding weathered by countless seasons. Inside, the day began as it always did, with Ruth Miller rising before dawn. Ruth, 68, wore the lines of her life gently on her face. Petite, stoop-shouldered, and always wrapped in a thick woolen cardigan, no matter the season she moved through the house, with a quiet energy that belied her age. Her soft gray hair was forever escaping its bun, and her blue eyes still sparkled with a mixture of warmth and worry. Once Ruth had been the steadfast heart of Cedar Hollow's community, the neighbor who remembered every birthday and sent casseroles when tragedy struck. But the sudden loss of her only daughter, Sarah Ethan's mother, had dimmed her spirit, leaving her more cautious, sometimes anxious, especially where her grandson was concerned. Beside her, Samuel Miller, now 72, shuffled about the kitchen tall and stooped his once broad shoulders, now narrowed by years of mountain winters and quiet sorrow. Samuel's hair was silver, his jaw square beneath a patchy white beard, and his hands bore the thick calluses of a lifetime, spent as a carpenter and volunteer fireman. Samuel had always been a man of few words, even more so since the accident that claimed his daughter and son-in-law. He spoke with his actions, keeping the house in repair, shoveling the walk for Ruth, and most of all, watching over Ethan with a silent devotion. Ethan Miller at 8 seemed as slight and pale as a wisp of morning mist. He had sandy brown hair that fell in messy waves over a smooth brow and large blue-gray eyes that always looked older than their years. Small for his age, Ethan walked with a hesitancy that made him appear almost fragile until you looked closer and saw the quiet stubbornness in the set of his jaw. He rarely spoke in more than a whisper, but he was fiercely gentle, especially with the animals. Since the accident, Ethan had clung to his rituals, and none more important than the morning walk with the dogs. 5 German shepherds waited for him, each dawn gathered patiently at the back door, as if aware of the gravity of their role. Atlas, the eldest at 6 years old, led the pack. Broad-shouldered and imposing Atlas had a thick gray and black coat with a noble angular face marked by a pale stripe down his muzzle. His eyes were amber intelligent and always scanning for trouble. Next was Juno, slightly smaller, her fur darker ears always perked, and with a calming presence that soothed both dogs and humans alike. Ranger and Moose, near twins at 4, shared a stockier build and deep russet highlights in their coats. They were inseparable, often seen shouldering each other in playful rivalry, but alert and obedient when Ethan was near. The youngest Blitz was just under 3, sleek and energetic, with a constantly twitching tail and a habit of circling the group as if on patrol. Each wore a sturdy leather collar with a brass nameplate, each moved with purpose, yet all deferred to Ethan. That morning, Ethan stood in the mudroom, pulling on his faded yellow parka and battered boots. He knelt, hands trembling only a little as he fastened Atlas's collar. "Ready, boy." His voice was so soft it was nearly lost beneath the sound of the coffee maker and Ruth's gentle humming. The 5 dogs responded with the subtle wag of tails and brightening of eyes. Samuel watched from the doorway, his arms folded, silent but vigilant. Ethan's morning walks were a kind of ritual, the only time he seemed at peace. Ruth had once tried to dissuade him, worried he'd slip on the ice, or that the dogs might get spooked by a passing truck. But Samuel, understanding the boy's silent grief, had insisted. "Let him have this," he'd said quietly one snowy morning. "It's what keeps him whole." And so each day as Cedar Hollow slept, Ethan and his companions stepped into the pale dawn, becoming a familiar, if mysterious, sight. They moved as one down Maple Lane, the dogs arrayed protectively around Ethan Atlas at his right hand, Blitz circling at the rear. The fog caught in the dog's fur, and Ethan's breath clouded before him. The town was just waking lights flickered on in the bakery, and the aroma of cinnamon rolls drifted into the street. Across the way, the postman, a stooped, friendly figure named Mr. Hawks, with a battered blue cap and red cheeks, paused to wave, but Ethan only nodded, eyes lowered. At the edge of the park, the group passed a neat little house painted pale green with white shutters. Behind the window, Lily Evans pressed her nose against the glass. Lily 7 was a tiny wisp of a girl with a curtain of brown hair and shy green eyes. She rarely left the house except for school, plagued by an ever-present anxiety that made crowds and loud noises unbearable. Her mother, a nurse who worked nights, often worried, but Lily found a small secret comfort in watching Ethan and the dogs. She envied his quiet certainty, the gentle way he moved among his canine friends, the way the dogs formed a living shield around him, as if nothing bad could ever reach him there. This particular morning, Ethan glanced up, catching Lily's eyes for just a moment. She shrank back reflexively, but he gave her a brief, almost imperceptible smile. Atlas, sensing the pause, turned his head toward the window tail, giving a single thump, as if to reassure her. As the group made their way along Main Street, the town began to stir. Mary Turner's flower shop was already open, its painted sign, Turner's Blossoms Est. 1982, hanging above a window box of frostbitten pansies. Mary herself stood outside arranging bouquets of early tulips and hyacinths. Mary Turner was in her early 60s, tall and angular, her gray hair always swept into a stern bun, her posture ramrod straight, her eyes the color of steel, missed nothing on the street. Known for her blunt opinions and fierce pride in her business, Mary had lived alone since her husband died a decade earlier. The loss had hardened her, making her quick to judge and slow to trust, though she doted on her plants with a tenderness she seldom showed to people. As Ethan and the pack passed, Moose, distracted by the unfamiliar scent of fertilizer, brushed a little too close to the sidewalk display. A ceramic pot toppled shattering against the pavement. Mary stiffened lips, pressed thin, and pointed a gloved finger at Ethan. "Keep those beasts away from my shop," she called out, voice sharp as a winter wind. "If I see one more broken pot, I'll call the sheriff myself." Ethan froze, cheeks flushing pink beneath his woolen hat. Atlas stepped forward, standing between Ethan and Mary, ears pricked, tail low, but steady. Ruth, who had followed from a distance with concern, hurried up, apologizing quickly and offering to pay for the damage. Mary, unimpressed, scooped up the broken shards and stalked inside, muttering about dangerous animals and irresponsible children. The dogs seemed to sense the tension drawing closer to Ethan as he turned away. The rest of the walk was quieter, the incident at the flower shop hanging over Ethan like a cloud. They circled the park where the snow lay undisturbed, except for the tracks of rabbits and birds. As the fog began to lift, Ethan watched the sunlight spread over the mountains, painting the world in a pale gold. For a moment, standing at the edge of Cedar Hollow, he closed his eyes and let himself breathe, surrounded by the warmth and steadiness of his loyal pack. The return home was uneventful. Ruth made hot cocoa for Ethan, who drank it quietly at the kitchen table, while the dog sprawled at his feet content. Samuel fixed the latch on the back gate, glancing over at Ethan with a soft grunt of approval. From her window, Lily watched until the last dog disappeared behind the Miller fence, wishing she had the courage to wave. And on Main Street, Mary Turner, still fuming, made a note to bring up that boy and his wild dogs at the next town meeting. By the following week, the tension sown by the flower shop incident had spread its roots into the frozen ground of Cedar Hollow. The icy fog had begun to burn away earlier each day, but a different sort of cloud now hovered over the town, a haze of rumor and speculation, thick as the mist that lingered near the creek at dawn. Main Street, usually the heartbeat of morning greetings and easy laughter, was filled instead with uneasy glances and half-whispered conversations. Mary Turner, ever the instigator when it came to order and public safety, seized the opportunity to air her grievances. At a hastily arranged meeting inside the back room of Turner's Blossoms, she stood before a mismatched collection of folding chairs, each occupied by a concerned face. Mary wore a tailored navy coat, her hair coiled even tighter than usual, lips painted a shade of red that declared she would not be ignored. Her eyes swept the room, sharp, expectant. At her right sat Tom Brooks, the recently retired sheriff of Cedar Hollow. In his late 60s, Tom was a big man, broad through the shoulders, with a stoic jaw softened only by a snow-white mustache. Years in law enforcement had etched crow's feet around his eyes and lent his voice a steady, gravelly assurance. He was respected, even liked, but rarely questioned once he'd made up his mind. Though now free from the duties of his badge, Tom carried an air of responsibility wherever he went. Dressed in worn corduroy and a faded green vest, he listened more than he spoke, but when he cleared his throat, people paid attention. Around them sat an assortment of other townsfolk. Mrs. Elaine Wicks, a wiry woman with bright scarves who ran the library and harbored a fierce love of order. Mr. Howard Blake, heavy-set and balding, whose son had once been nipped by a stray years ago, and never forgave dangerous breeds. And Mrs. Jeanette Martin, slender, always shivering, clutching her purse as though it held her very security. Mary called these meetings concerned citizens, but she was both founder and conductor of this wary little orchestra. Something must be done. Mary began tapping a stack of note cards on her knee. That boy Ethan and his pack of dogs are running wild. It's only a matter of time before someone gets hurt. We've already seen property damage, and it won't stop there. She recounted in crisp detail the shattered flower pot and accused the Miller's dogs of digging up tulip beds at the park, even if no one had actually witnessed it. She referenced muddy paw prints found near the school and raised the specter of dangerous, unsupervised animals near the children. Tom Brooks offered a measured perspective. Mary, I know you're worried and folks should feel safe, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. I've known those dogs since they were pups, never had an incident. Still, he didn't dismiss her outright. Years of service had taught him how fast a story could outpace the truth. But Mary had come prepared. She produced her phone and played short, choppy videos, a dog indistinct in the dusk, trotting across the park lawn. Another nose to the ground by the library fence. Blurry footage of a toppled trash can. Proof, she said, that those animals are out of control. The faces in the room shifted from skepticism to growing alarm. As the rumors spread, Main Street buzzed with speculation. Parents clutched their children's hands tighter near the park. Two old men at the diner debated the dangers of big dogs over weak coffee. Mrs. Wicks issued an unofficial ban on unsupervised animals near the library steps. Even those who doubted the stories fell silent, rather than defend the Millers, unwilling to draw Mary Turner's ire. Ethan, meanwhile, felt the coldness not just in the air, but in every glance, every sudden hush as he passed. On his morning walks, he took quieter routes, sometimes avoiding Main Street altogether. The dog, sensing his unease, kept closer than ever, Atlas always glued to his side, Juno circling protectively, the others never more than a step behind. Their presence, once a comfort, now felt almost like a wall. One afternoon after school, Ruth received a letter from the town council, an official request for a welfare check and a statement about the potential hazards posed by their dogs. She read the letter aloud at the kitchen table, her voice trembling. Samuel took the paper in his weathered hands and said nothing, but Ethan saw the anger flicker in his grandfather's pale blue eyes. "I haven't done anything," Ethan whispered later to Ruth as she tucked him in. His voice was so soft, even she almost missed it. "The dogs are good. Why don't they see?" She smoothed his hair, kissing his forehead. "People are scared, Ethan. Sometimes that makes them mean. But the truth always finds its way out." Despite Ruth's reassurances, Ethan grew more withdrawn. His world narrowed to home, the 5 dogs, and music. Each evening as the sky turned lavender behind the mountains, Ethan sat at the window and listened to the faint notes of piano drifting from the park bandstand. The man at the keys was Mr. Parker, a newcomer to Cedar Hollow. Mr. Parker, first name Elliot, though few knew it, had arrived only that fall. In his early 40s, he was tall and slender, with unruly black hair streaked by premature silver, a crooked nose, and kind, searching eyes behind thick glasses. Always dressed in old corduroy blazers and fingerless gloves, he moved with a subtle limp, a legacy of a car accident that ended his performing career years before. Elliot rarely spoke of the past, but was quick to smile, quicker still, to offer a tune for any wandering ear. He played the public piano most evenings, sometimes jazz, sometimes gentle lullabies, always watching the world with an artist's hopeful curiosity. Ethan, drawn to the melancholy of the music, sometimes dared to sit on the edge of the park, just within earshot. The dogs flopped around him like a furry moat. Once he caught Mr. Parker's eye. The musician gave a little wave, but sensing Ethan's reticence didn't press. Instead, he played a soft, winding melody, something that seemed meant for just the boy and his silent, watchful pack. The days past the divide in Cedar Hollow growing. The concerned citizens began gathering signatures for a petition which Mary Turner circulated with fervor. She stopped by the diner, the post office, even the church after Sunday service, frowning at those who hesitated to add their names. The town council agreed to schedule a formal discussion for the next meeting. Meanwhile, at the park, Atlas and Blitz discovered a stray cat tangled in a bush. Atlas barked softly, alerting Ethan, who managed to free the frightened creature, a scrawny tabby with torn ears and a missing tail tip. Ethan brought the cat home in his backpack, offering her a bowl of Ruth's leftover stew. Ruth, at first wary of adding to their household, relented when she saw the animal curl up on Ethan's bed, purring for the first time in who knew how long. Ethan named her Tansy, and she quickly became another shadow in the quiet Miller home, wary of the dogs at first, but gradually learning they meant no harm. One evening, Lily Evans watched from her bedroom window as Ethan, Atlas, and the new cat played in the yard. She wished for courage to cross the street to join their circle, but the voices of grown-ups, her mother, her teacher, even Mary Turner, who stopped by with a bouquet, rang in her head, warning her about dangerous dogs and that odd Miller boy. So she watched and waited, the loneliness in her chest as sharp as the mountain air. By month's end, Cedar Hollow was divided, half the town, ready to believe, the worst half unsure but silent. A few like Mr. Parker, and the mailman Mr. Hawks quietly supportive. The next town meeting promised fireworks. Inside the Miller house, Ethan clung tighter to his dogs and his small rituals, hoping that someone, anyone, might see the truth behind the rumors, and that maybe, with spring, a kinder season would come to Cedar Hollow. The winter days lingered in Cedar Hollow, but inside the Miller home, a flicker of change began to glow. It started on a gray Saturday morning, when Ethan, restless and unable to shake the echo of accusations from the townspeople, wandered into the attic, a cramped space beneath the sagging roof, thick with the scent of old cedar and dust. The attic held a patchwork of forgotten life. Faded Christmas ornaments, Samuel's hand-built sled, Ruth's wedding dress folded in a chest, and boxes marked Sarah's things. Driven by an ache he couldn't name, Ethan began to rummage. His hands fell upon a battered leather notebook, its cover soft from years of use. On the first page, in his mother's looping hand, it read, "Dog Training Notes for Rainy Days and Bright Tomorrows." Ethan's chest tightened, but curiosity drew him on. Sarah Miller, once a bright presence, tall and willowy, with wild blonde hair and laughing green eyes, had poured her passion into animals. As a young woman, she was known in Cedar Hollow for her kindness to every living thing. Birds seemed to land on her shoulder, stray dogs trailed her home. Yet Sarah's gentle soul was shaped by hardship. Her father's early death had left her the family's anchor. This responsibility, coupled with the rural realities of Colorado, gave Sarah a quiet resilience. She had learned to speak gently, but also to be obeyed. The notebook was filled with diagrams, code words, games, and notes about the 5 dogs, each page detailed with care and warmth. Atlas steady likes clear instructions. Juno calms, others responds to soft whistles. Moose distracts, easily reward for focus. Ranger loyal needs extra encouragement. Blitz high energy, channel it. There were sketches of hand signals and tips for bonding, all written with a love Ethan could almost feel as his fingers traced the ink. For hours, Ethan sat cross-legged beneath the low beams, poring over the notebook by the light of a single bulb. Tansy, the tabby cat, now more confident after a week in the Miller home, slinked by and curled in his lap, purring softly. Energized by discovery, Ethan hurried downstairs and began practicing in secret. In the chilly backyard, he tried the signals, fingers trembling with hope. Atlas cocked his head, ears perked, then executed a perfect sit at Ethan's gesture. Juno followed, nuzzling his palm. Moose barked once Blitz wagged wildly, and even the usually independent Ranger nudged closer, eyes bright with understanding. Each day after school, Ethan rehearsed, sometimes with Ruth watching discreetly from the kitchen window, sometimes alone, but always with determination sharpening his gaze. He began to carry the notebook everywhere, tucking it into his coat, memorizing its lessons. Meanwhile, outside the Miller fence, the town's suspicion had not faded. Mary Turner's resolve to rid Cedar Hollow of the menace intensified. She began to patrol the public park with her phone, ready to record any misbehavior. Whenever a flower bed was found trampled or a bench muddy, Mary was quick to call the sheriff's office voice, clipped and indignant. "It's those dogs again. Can't you do something?" More than once, Officer Cale Jensen, one of the younger deputies, round-faced and kind with sandy hair and a nervous smile, arrived at the Miller house, his notepad ready. Officer Jensen was new to town, eager to please, but often uncomfortable. He listened patiently to Mary's reports, then to Samuel and Ruth's calm explanations. "We're careful. Officer Ruth would assure Ethan keeps to the trails. The dogs are never off-leash in public spaces." Cale, a man who disliked conflict, wrote his reports, but his doubts grew as he never saw the dogs misbehaving. Still, protocol was protocol. Each visit ended with Samuel's quiet handshake, Ruth's tired smile, and Ethan's silent worry that he had brought more trouble home. Inside the Miller home was its own world. Ruth, weary but determined, baked more biscuits for the dogs, bread for the table. Samuel, stoic, spent his days repairing what needed fixing, eyes ever watchful over Ethan. On quiet evenings, music drifted from the park where Mr. Parker sat at the old upright piano on the bandstand. The townsfolk mostly ignored him, but the music found Ethan always listening from the back fence. The dogs sprawled around him. One afternoon, Mr. Parker paused mid-tune and looked up to see Ethan sitting quietly with Tansy, perched on his knee, and Atlas at his side. "Would you like to learn?" Mr. Parker called out, his voice gentle, not pressing. Up close, Parker was a tall man with an easy posture, his hands strong and scarred fingers slightly bent from old breaks. He had a way of smiling that made it seem like you were part of a secret. He had come to Cedar Hollow after his accident, a city musician who lost his spotlight, but not his love for teaching. "Music's for everyone," he added, "and I give lessons for free if you want." Ethan, unsure, only nodded, but the idea took root. Later that week, as Ethan passed the Evans house, Lily was in her usual place at the window. She was a slight girl, with tangled brown hair, wearing oversized sweaters that hung past her wrists. That day she held something in her hands, a small card, pale blue with a drawing of a dog and the words, "You're brave," written in careful looping letters. When Ethan walked by, she slipped outside, face flushed, and pressed the card into his palm before darting back behind the door. Ethan read the note twice, warmth blooming in his chest, and tucked it safely inside his mother's notebook. Spring crept closer. The days stretched, though the air was still sharp. In the park, flowers fought through the frost. Mary Turner, determined to prove her point, stood watch one afternoon as a group of children played. Suddenly, a commotion. Someone had run through the tulips, scattering petals and leaving muddy prints. Mary rushed over, phone raised, expecting to find one of Ethan's dogs. Instead, she caught sight of a raccoon scurrying away, its tail dusted in pollen. She hesitated, then, lips pressed thin, decided not to mention it to anyone. The next day, however, she told the story as if she'd chased off a dog, and her listeners nodded, convinced. The rumors grew. Back at the Miller house, Ethan kept up his secret training. He found that when he used the hand signals from his mother's notes, the dogs grew more responsive, more focused. Atlas became more protective, but less anxious. Juno's calming energy seemed to rub off on Blitz, who learned to sit still for whole minutes at a time. Moose and Ranger, once easily distracted, would now follow Ethan's lead through the backyard, weaving through cones and jumping over makeshift hurdles. Even Tansy joined the drills, trotting along the fence, tail high, purring, as if to cheer them on. On a rare sunny Saturday, Mr. Parker dropped by the Miller house, sheet music in hand. He greeted Ruth at the door with a polite nod, his voice low but friendly. "I was hoping Ethan might join my Saturday class at the library. It's just a handful of kids, nothing formal, just some songs and maybe a little fun." Ruth hesitated, glancing at Samuel, who gave a rare, approving grunt. Ethan, hearing this, looked to his grandmother, hope flickering in his eyes. Ruth smiled, brushing his hair back. "Why not give it a try, Ethan? Your mother would have loved it." Parker waved to the dogs, who sniffed his hands in greeting, and winked at Ethan. "Bring Atlas along if you like. I don't mind a good audience." That promise, simple as it was, felt like a door opening. That evening, as twilight settled over Cedar Hollow, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his mother's notebook open beside him, Lily's card tucked inside. Atlas lay at his feet, Juno curled in a sunbeam, the rest sprawled nearby. Tansy purred in his lap. The house, usually heavy with worry, was lighter for the first time in weeks. Through the window, Ethan watched the shadows lengthen and dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, things would turn for the better. The sun rose over Cedar Hollow, casting pale gold across the fields and forests, and the air was sharp, every breath stinging with a crystalline clarity that only deep winter could bring. On Saturdays, the lake at the edge of town became a world of its own, ringed by pines and hidden from Main Street by a stand of old birches. This morning, Ethan rose before the rest of the house, quietly dressing in Layer's blue wool sweater, his battered yellow parka, the scarf Ruth had knitted him years ago. The dogs sensing adventure paced at the back door, Atlas regal and steady, Juno, attentive Moose and Blitz, energetic and Ranger, the watchful deep-eyed sentinel silent at his side. Tansy the cat stayed curled on Ethan's pillow, uninterested in the snow. They followed the path down to the lake, their paws and boots leaving a trail in the deep, untouched snow. The ice stretched across the surface, a silvery sheet, broken only by reeds along the shore, and the scratchy tracks of crows and deer. Most of the town's children would come later, once the sun burned off the last of the night's frost. But for now, Ethan and his pack had the lake to themselves, or so he thought. Ethan was teaching the dogs a new signal, inspired by one of the more complicated sketches in his mother's notebook. With a series of hand gestures, he directed Moose and Blitz to weave between the birch trees, while Juno and Atlas circled the edge of the lake, checking for dangers. Ranger, the largest after Atlas, waited by Ethan's side. He was just 3 years old, his coat thick and dark, with striking white fur on his chest, and eyes the color of wet earth. Ranger was the most cautious, sensitive to every shift in Ethan's mood. Suddenly, the silence broke a sharp cry from the far side of the lake. Ethan stiffened, and the dogs froze their ears, tilting toward the sound. Without a word, Ranger bounded ahead, Ethan following at a run, the others falling into formation. Near the stand of birches, half hidden behind a snow-dusted log, Lily Evans sat on the frozen ground, her face streaked with tears. Her red mittens were muddied, her knees scraped through her leggings. Around her, 3 older boys known to Ethan only from schoolyard whispers, notorious for their rough games, stood jeering, one with a snowball in his hand, the others laughing as Lily tried to pull herself up. Lily, usually so timid and withdrawn, seemed smaller than ever, now her hair tangled and her shoulders hunched as if she could make herself invisible. As the dogs approached, the boys stepped back in alarm. Ranger moved between Lily and her tormentor's muscles, taut tail down, emitting a deep warning rumble enough to make the boldest boy hesitate. "Hey! Ethan!" shouted his voice, carrying in the cold air. "Leave her alone!" The boys, recognizing both Ethan and his intimidating canine entourage, blustered for a moment, then scattered, hurling a last insult over their shoulders before disappearing into the trees. Lily wiped her face on her sleeve, trying to hide her fear. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaking. Ethan knelt beside her, awkward but gentle. "Are you okay?" he asked. Ranger pressed close to Lily's side, his warm fur a shield. She nodded, though her chin quivered and her eyes darted to Ethan's. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Lily whispered, "They do this sometimes. Because I'm different." Ethan didn't know what to say, but he offered her a mitten full of snow, packing it gently against her scraped knee. "It gets better," he said, not sure if he believed it. The dogs gathered round, offering comfort in the way only animals could. Juno licked Lily's hand. Blitz wagged his tail so hard he tumbled, and Moose sat beside her, as if determined to guard her from the world. It was then that the mood shifted, pierced by the sharp voice of Mary Turner, echoing across the ice. Dressed in a heavy black coat and fur-lined boots, Mary looked every bit the town matriarch, her steely gaze fixed on the children and the dogs. Her hair was drawn even tighter than usual, her gloved hands clutching a bright red phone, ready to record. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her words slicing through the cold. Her gaze landed on Ranger, still close to Lily, and immediately suspicion flared in her eyes. "Step back from her. Those dogs, one of them was attacking that girl. I saw it with my own eyes." Her accusation rang across the ice. Ethan sprang to his feet, cheeks flushed with anger and cold. Ranger was protecting her. "Those boys were hurting Lily. Ask her." The commotion drew a handful of early risers from nearby houses, including Mr. Howard Blake, heavyset with a thick brown parka, and Mrs. Jeanette Martin, slender and pinched, who always seemed to appear where gossip might be found. The little crowd clustered, murmuring as Mary Turner pointed an accusing finger at Ethan and the pack. "I told you all. These dogs are dangerous. They don't belong near children. Someone call the sheriff." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. For the first time, he spoke with a steadiness he didn't know he possessed. That's not true. Ranger would never hurt anyone. He saved Lily. His words, though quiet, carried in the still air. Lily, trembling, found her voice. It wasn't Ranger, she said, her eyes shining with determination. The boys were picking on me. Ranger stood in front and scared them off. He didn't bite or growl at me. He helped. For a moment, silence hung, broken only by the dogs breathing and the distant sound of Mr. Parker playing a gentle tune on the bandstand piano, the notes drifting over the trees. The townsfolk looked from Lily to Mary Turner, uncertain. Mr. Howard Blake grunted. Kids will say anything, but Mrs. Martin frowned, softening as she noticed Lily's scraped knees and tear-stained cheeks. Mary, maybe we don't know the whole story, she ventured. Mary Turner's lips tightened. This isn't over. I'll be watching, and so will the sheriff. She stormed off her boots, crunching over the ice, muttering into her phone. The crowd drifted after her, some casting wary glances at Ethan and the dogs, others less certain now of what to believe. When the last of them disappeared, Ethan let out a shaky breath. Lily hugged her knees. I'm sorry, she whispered, for all the trouble. Ethan shook his head. It's not your fault. I'm glad you're okay. He offered her a hand, and together they walked back across the snow, the dogs falling in around them. Juno nudged Lily's hand, and for the first time, Lily smiled, small but real. When they reached the street, Lily turned to Ethan. Thank you. For everything. She hesitated, then added, maybe we could walk the dogs together sometime. Ethan nodded, a shy but genuine smile spreading across his face. That afternoon, word of the incident at the lake spread quickly. Some believed Mary Turner, their doubts stoked by months of rumor, while others wondered at Lily's newfound courage. In the Miller house, Ethan recounted the story to Ruth and Samuel, who listened gravely. You did the right thing, Samuel said, his voice low but proud. Ruth squeezed Ethan's hand, her eyes shining with tears. I'm proud of you, Ethan, and of Ranger, too. That night, as snow began to fall again outside, Ethan sat at his desk, the lamp casting a golden glow on the pages of his mother's notebook. He tucked Lily's Your Brave card beside a fresh scrap of paper, a drawing of 2 children and 5 dogs crossing a frozen lake beneath a winter sky. Tansy the cat curled nearby, purring, as the house settled into warmth and quiet. Outside, the rumors of Cedar Hollow continued to swirl, but within those walls, a small circle of trust had grown stronger, and 2 lonely children had found the first spark of friendship. The tension in Cedar Hollow had thickened with the late winter clouds, heavy and low, above the valley, mirroring the uneasy atmosphere gripping the town. Each day seemed colder than the last, and the villagers huddled indoors, voices rising behind closed doors rather than in the sunlit park or at the cafe. Mary Turner was everywhere, at the grocery, at the church, and most insistently at her flower shop, where her resolve to protect the community became almost legendary. On Monday morning, Mary Turner called for an emergency meeting of the concerned citizens. The invitation, hand-delivered by Mrs. Elaine Wicks, her thin, brisk librarian's fingers wrapped in bright wool gloves, made it clear that the gathering would address the ongoing canine crisis. The back room of Turner's Blossoms was crowded with familiar faces. Tom Brooks, his broad frame squeezed awkwardly onto a wicker chair. Mr. Howard Blake, looking weary and skeptical. Mrs. Martin, clutching a thermos of tea and peering suspiciously at the shop's door. Mary Turner presided like a general, standing beneath a wreath of plastic tulips, her gray hair pulled into a severe knot. The danger has grown, she announced, voice pitched for drama. These animals have frightened children, ruined flower beds, and just last week, one was seen near the school playground. It's time we petition the council to have the dogs removed from the Miller home and sent to the county animal shelter. Enough is enough. Tom Brooks cleared his throat, his mustache twitching. Let's be reasonable, Mary. There's never been a bite, never real harm. But Mary shook her head, righteous and unwavering. It only takes one mistake, Tom. Will you take responsibility when it happens? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. Ethan had overheard snatches of conversation all week at the store, at school, even in the park. Even Ruth, ever the optimist, had grown pale and withdrawn. Samuel's silence became more pronounced. His eyes dark and clouded as he watched his family from behind his newspaper. The dogs sensed the tension. Juno stayed close to Ruth Moose, and Blitz stuck to Ethan's heels. Ranger prowled the property line, nose in the wind. Atlas became Ethan's shadow, more serious than ever. That afternoon, Mary Turner gathered her supporters at her shop. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the sign and sending snow swirling in sudden gusts. The crowd pressed close, many standing, others clustered near the register. Mary read aloud the petition, her voice clear and urgent. As she did, Mrs. Wicks handed around a clipboard, and one by one, the names appeared beneath the demand. For the safety of our children and our peace of mind, we call on the council to remove all 5 German shepherds from the Miller residence, effective immediately. Back at the Miller home, Samuel was in the kitchen working quietly at the counter. His strong hands, though slowed by age, still moved with precision. He paused, pressing a fist to his chest, then resumed peeling potatoes. Ruth noticed the wince but said nothing, not wanting to worry him further. Ethan was outside practicing signals with the dogs in the snowy yard. Atlas caught every movement, alert and focused, while Tansy watched from the window ledge, tail flicking with curiosity. Suddenly, a sharp stabbing pain knifed through Samuel's chest. He gasped, dropping the knife, and staggered toward the table, knocking a mug to the floor. Ruth called out in alarm, rushing to his side, but Samuel couldn't answer. He sank to his knees, his face pale and slick with sweat. In the yard, Atlas's ears went up. He gave a sharp bark, hackles raised, and then before Ethan could react, he bolted toward the house, muscles rippling beneath his thick coat. But the kitchen door was locked, and Ruth's hands, shaking, fumbled with the knob. Atlas circled, barking frantically, then sprinted toward Main Street, vanishing around the corner, leaving Ethan stunned and calling after him. Meanwhile, the meeting at Turner's Blossoms was reaching its climax. Mary was summarizing their case when the front door burst open with a crash. Atlas bounded inside, fur spiked with snow, barking with a deep, urgent tone that echoed off the glass vases and startled every soul present. For a split second, the room froze. Mary Turner spun around, her face drained of color, as Atlas approached, tail-low eyes fixed on her, not with aggression, but with pleading desperation. "It's attacking!" Mary shrieked, stumbling back and knocking a vase to the ground. "Someone do something!" Panic rippled through the group. Tom Brooks rose quickly, but instead of fear, he saw the look in Atlas's eyes, intelligent, desperate, not violent. Atlas barked once, then turned bolting back toward the street, pausing to look back at Tom and the others as if begging them to follow. Tom, ignoring Mary's shouts, moved to the door, his instincts from decades of emergency service overriding the chaos. "Something's wrong," he declared. "That dog's trying to tell us something." Against Mary's protests, Tom and several others followed Atlas down Main Street, passing startled pedestrians and neighbors who quickly fell in line behind. Atlas led them straight to the Miller house, where Ruth was waving from the porch, her voice shrill with panic. "It's Samuel! He's collapsed! I can't get him up!" The group rushed inside, Tom taking command, barking orders for someone to call 911, others to clear space. Atlas stayed at Samuel's side, whining softly, pressing his nose to the old man's hand. Ethan, tears streaming down his face, clung to Ruth. The ambulance arrived within minutes, paramedics bustling into the cramped kitchen. The lead EMT, a middle-aged woman named Carla, with cropped black hair and a calm, efficient air, quickly assessed the situation. "It's a heart attack," she said quietly, "but we're in time." They loaded Samuel onto a stretcher, Atlas refusing to move until Tom gently took his collar and led him outside. Mary Turner, standing in the yard with the crowd, watched her face, a storm of emotions, fear, confusion, denial. By the time the ambulance pulled away, the story was already traveling through town, how Atlas had saved Samuel's life, how he had burst into the flower shop, how Tom Brooks had recognized something in the dog's actions. Some whispered about hero dogs and guardian angels. Others grumbled that it didn't change anything, that a big dog running loose was always a risk. Mary Turner, though, visibly shaken, refused to back down. That evening, she called another meeting this time, insisting that Atlas's actions, though lucky, were further proof that such powerful animals couldn't be trusted among children and the elderly. She pushed her petition, arguing that next time someone might get hurt. Some townsfolk, softened by the day's events, hesitated to sign, but others, still afraid, added their names. Back at home, Ruth hugged Ethan, whispering that it was Atlas's love and Ethan's training that had made the difference. Tom Brooks, before leaving, knelt by Atlas, stroking his ears. "You did, good boy. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Ethan, exhausted, let himself believe just for a moment that good deeds might win out over fear. That night, as the wind battered the windows and snow fell in thick silence, the Miller house was both a haven and a fortress. The dogs curled close to Ethan's bed, Tansy on the pillow, Ruth awake in the next room, and Samuel stable in the hospital. Cedar Hollow still divided, wrestled with fear and gratitude, but somewhere beneath the worry, hope took root. In the early morning, Cedar Hollow was wrapped in a cold, wary silence. The aftermath of Samuel's rescue still rippled through the town, making every conversation a little sharper, every glance a little longer. But it was not just relief in the air, there was tension. The kind that comes before a storm breaks, and everyone in the village seemed to sense it. On Wednesday, an official sedan rolled quietly down Main Street, parking in front of the Miller home. From it emerged three figures each, a silhouette against the rising sun. The first was Ms. Karen Doyle, a social worker from the county office, her posture upright and professional, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. In her late 40s, Karen wore her brown hair in a neat bun, her voice gentle but decisive, a woman practiced in both listening and command, shaped by years spent navigating small-town crises and broken families. The second was Officer Jack Dempsey, a local police officer in his early 30s with a sturdy build and sandy blonde hair beneath his cap. He was known in Cedar Hollow for his fairness and unflappable calm, a man who never raised his voice unless absolutely necessary. His blue eyes missed little, and today he brought both his notepad and an open mind. The last was Dr. Naomi Feldman, a petite veterinarian in her mid-50s, her gray hair cut short for practicality. She was renowned for her skill with animals and her clear-eyed approach to their behavior. Her hands, nimble and steady, were marked by faint scars and calluses from a lifetime of care. With a stethoscope tucked into her jacket pocket and a satchel slung across her chest, she looked every inch the professional. They were greeted at the door by Ruth, pale and drawn, but steady. She invited them in, her voice trembling only slightly. The living room was warm but tense. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, Lily by his side, for the first time her small hand resting on his wrist. The 5 dogs lounged in their usual spots, all alert. Atlas sat closest to Ethan, his amber eyes fixed on the new arrivals, Juno and Moose, at his flanks, Blitz and Ranger by the fireplace. Tansy, now plumper from weeks of good food, watched from atop the fridge, her tail twitching. Karen introduced herself with a gentle smile, assuring Ruth that their only goal was to ensure safety for everyone, people and animals alike. Officer Dempsey greeted Ethan and Lily, kneeling to offer a palm to each dog before straightening up. Dr. Feldman crouched to watch Atlas, murmuring greetings in a low, kind tone. Before the assessments could begin, there was a knock at the door. Mary Turner entered with her stack of printed papers, and a self-assured air followed closely by Tom Brooks and Mrs. Wicks. Mary's eyes were cold with purpose. "If we're to have a fair hearing, everyone should see the evidence," she announced. "I've brought video proof." She set up her laptop and began clicking through clips, grainy footage of the park, glimpses of fur darting past, flowers, distant barking, children shouting. In each, Mary's voice narrated, "There, that's the dogs running wild. And here, see how close they are to the flower beds." She played one video where Atlas appeared to be lunging, but the clip was cut short before the context was clear. Officer Dempsey frowned but said nothing, taking notes. Karen Doyle, experienced in navigating bias, asked calmly, "Are there original copies of these videos?" Mary bristled. "I was sent them by concerned citizens, but the truth is obvious." The tension thickened as neighbors gathered at the windows, drawn by the promise of drama. Then Lily, normally silent in crowds, stepped forward. Her cheeks were red, but her voice was clear. "That's not what happened. I have proof." She pulled out her own phone, hands trembling. With Ethan's help, she connected it to the TV and played a video recorded from a different angle, the town's new security camera recently installed by the park committee. The footage showed a group of raccoons raiding the flower beds at dawn, tumbling over each other in a chaos of fur and squeaks. In another scene, Atlas was seen carefully nosing Lily's mitten from a patch of snow, then returning to Ethan's side. There were no shots of dogs running wild, no evidence of aggression. Mr. Hawks, the postman, joined the gathering, his round face flushed from the cold. "I see Ethan and those dogs every morning," he said. "They never make trouble, always polite, always careful. It's those raccoons you want to worry about. They'll eat anything that doesn't bite back. Mrs. Martin, arms folded, spoke up, her voice uncertain. I did see some animals in the park last week, not dogs smaller. I think it was raccoons. Tom Brooks, watching the videos, nodded, his skepticism finally giving way to certainty. Looks clear to me. Mary Turner's face grew tight, her lips thinning to a line. There's still the matter of the dog scaring children, she insisted, desperate to regain control. But this time, her authority faltered. Even Mrs. Wicks looked uncomfortable. Mary, we all want safety, but we shouldn't blame without proof, she said gently. Meanwhile, Dr. Feldman began her assessment, moving from dog to dog with practiced efficiency. She checked their teeth paws, eyes each dog, relaxed under her touch. Atlas, she noted, watched Samuel especially closely. Dr. Feldman turned to Ethan. Can you show me what Atlas does when your grandfather isn't feeling well? Ethan nodded, recounting the day Samuel collapsed. Atlas, as if on cue, placed himself between Samuel and the others, then nudged Ruth's hand until she paid attention. Dr. Feldman raised an eyebrow, impressed. Atlas, can you come here? She called. Atlas approached, calm and obedient. She ran a few simple tests, mimicking a fainting episode, and watched as Atlas alerted, immediately barking sharply, then running to fetch Ruth. She turned to Karen Doyle. This is remarkable. Atlas is demonstrating behaviors consistent with a medical alert dog. Specifically, he's detecting changes before a cardiac event. That's an ability we rarely see, and almost never without formal training. Karen looked at Ruth, Ethan, and Samuel, who had just returned home from the hospital, still weak but recovering. I've seen enough, Karen said gently. I see a well-loved family responsible with their animals. The allegations are not supported by evidence. Officer Dempsey nodded, putting his notepad away. No reason for intervention, he agreed. The room exhaled relief palpable. Some of the neighbors clapped quietly. Mrs. Martin dabbed her eyes, and Mr. Hawks beamed. Mary Turner stood rigid, then spun on her heel, and stalked out, her supporters wavering in her wake. Outside, the news traveled quickly. Within hours, the town's mood shifted. Where there had been suspicion, now there was admiration. People spoke of Atlas as a hero, of Ethan as a brave boy, of Lily as a truth-teller. The Miller house filled with flowers and casseroles, and even Tom Brooks dropped by with a sack of dog biscuits for the real town watchdogs. But in her shop, Mary Turner refused to admit fault, muttering about blind fools and lucky breaks. Still, the tide had turned. The heart of Cedar Hollow was transformed for the winter festival. Strings of white lights looped from lampposts to snow-laden trees, and the town square sparkled with the kind of magic that only comes when a community dares to hope again. The air was crisp and bright, alive with the laughter of children, the waft of cinnamon and pine, and the eager anticipation of the festival's highlight, a performance by the children and dogs who had become, in a few short weeks, the beating heart of the town's newest legend. Ethan Miller stood backstage, his small hands trembling as he adjusted his scarf. The weight of attention made his chest tight, but his eyes, always searching for reassurance, found Lily, waiting with a shy but steadfast smile. Lily wore a blue dress over thick leggings, her unruly brown hair pinned back with a ribbon. She looked transformed no longer. The timid watcher behind a window, but a girl who had found her place among friends. At their feet, the 5 German shepherds, Atlas, Juno, Ranger Moose, and Blitz, sat in disciplined rows, tails wagging quietly, their matching coats gleaming under the festival lights. Even Tansy the tabby made a rare appearance, curled up on a stool next to the piano, a touch of mischief in her green eyes. Mr. Parker, the town's music teacher, and Ethan's mentor, hovered nearby in his faded red vest and soft cap. He was grayer than in summers past, but his voice was gentle as ever. You'll do just fine, Ethan. Remember, let the music guide you, and trust your friends. His encouragement was steady, carrying the memory of all those evenings spent practicing by the dusty upright in the park. In the crowd, townspeople gathered in thick coats and woolen hats. Ruth and Samuel, still a little frail, but beaming with pride, sat together near the front, their hands clasped. Even Officer Dempsey and Dr. Feldman could be seen among the audience, both waving to Ethan and Lily as they peeked out from the wings. But not all eyes were friendly. Mary Turner moved through the gathering, with stiff precision, her face set in a brittle smile. Tonight she was determined to prove her suspicions about the dogs once and for all. As the performers made last-minute preparations, Mary waited until the stage was momentarily empty. She slipped behind the curtains, a small paper pouch clutched in her gloved hand. With quick, furtive motions, she sprinkled pepper dust around the edge of the platform, hoping to provoke chaos. A sneezing fit. A burst of barking anything to turn the tide back in her favor. Minutes later, the festival master of ceremonies, Mrs. Wicks, in her glittering holiday shawl, stepped to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, tonight we are proud to present a very special symphony brought to us by two of Cedar Hollow's bravest children and their remarkable companions. The applause rolled over the square like a wave. Ethan stepped forward, his face pale but resolute. He bowed to the crowd, then sat at the old upright piano. The keys were cold beneath his fingers, but as he played the first tentative notes, a gentle, hopeful melody that Mr. Parker had arranged just for him, the music wove through the winter air, softening even the hardest faces. Lily stepped to the center, her voice clear, as she began to recite a poem she'd written for the town, a story of trust, of second chances of loyalty, born in storm and trial. As she spoke, the 5 dogs performed their practiced routine, moving in intricate patterns around the stage, weaving between Ethan and Lily, leaping and spinning in perfect coordination. Not one was distracted by the pepper. Juno sneezed once, but as if remembering Ethan's signals, quickly composed herself and resumed the dance. The crowd held its breath, mesmerized. Then Moose's ears pricked up, turning away from the spotlights toward the shadowed edge of the square. His nose worked the airtail, stiff. He broke formation, trotting to the edge of the festival, nose pressed to the snow. There, near the ice sculpture behind a cluster of pine boughs, a small child in a yellow parka sat huddled and crying. It was Sophie Carver, the baker's youngest daughter, who had wandered away from her family. Moose barked a sharp, insistent call that drew the attention of Ethan, the other dogs, and soon the entire square. The performance halted, but the energy shifted. Blitz and Atlas darted after Moose, guiding Mrs. Carver and Officer Dempsey through the crowd to the lost girl. Within moments, Sophie was wrapped in her mother's arms, safe and warm, while the crowd burst into applause, this time for the dogs who had turned a near disaster into a moment of grace. The performance resumed more heartfelt than before. Ethan's hands flew over the keys, Lily's voice rang with hope, and the dogs performed with renewed pride. When the last note faded, Cedar Hollow erupted in cheers, many rising to their feet. Ethan looked to his grandmother, who wiped tears from her eyes, and to Samuel, whose weak smile glowed with pride. Lily hugged Juno and Blitz. Tansy, unbothered by the commotion, stretched and leapt from her stool onto Ethan's lap. Suddenly, the festival master of ceremonies quieted the crowd. Mrs. Wicks' voice, stern, announced that she had witnessed Mary Turner behind the stage, and others quickly came forward to corroborate. The evidence was undeniable: the pepper dust on the floor, the paper pouch found near the piano, and Mary's own panicked protestations. The crowd murmured, some in shock, others in disappointment. Officer Dempsey, ever calm, stepped forward to speak. "We all want what's best for Cedar Hollow, but tonight proved that trust, courage, and kindness are stronger than fear and suspicion. Let's remember what these children and these dogs have taught us." Mary Turner was quietly asked to leave the festival. For the first time, her certainty seemed to crack. She looked not angry, but deeply tired, her shoulders slumped beneath her elegant coat. The crowd turned its focus back to the stage where Ethan and Lily stood together, surrounded by their dogs and a new circle of friends. That night, as snow began to fall gently on Cedar Hollow, the square buzzed with laughter and song. Townsfolk mingled, trading stories and sharing cups of cocoa. Mrs. Carver baked an extra tray of cookies for Moose, and even Mr. Brooks tipped his hat to Ethan, whispering, "That was a fine thing you did, son." Under the festival lights, differences faded. Neighbors who had once eyed the Miller home with suspicion now waved in greeting. The music, the poetry, and the heroism of 5 devoted dogs had awakened something long dormant, a spirit of unity, forgiveness, and belonging. Morning light poured across Cedar Hollow, as if the town itself were taking a deep breath after a long, stormy winter. The festival's echoes still lingered in the air, mingling with the scent of pine-melting snow and the hopeful buzz of neighbors greeting each other in the streets. Change was everywhere, soft, real, and unmistakable. It began with Mary Turner, who had not been seen since her abrupt exit from the festival. For days she stayed in her home. Curtains drawn, the once lively flower shop shuttered. Whispers fluttered through town, but on a bright Sunday Mary reappeared at the square. Gone was her stiff posture and crisp voice. She seemed smaller, her cheeks pale, shoulders hunched inside a faded gray coat. At her side was Mrs. Wick's arm gently linked through Mary's, as if guiding a friend rather than an adversary. The townsfolk fell silent as Mary stepped up to the newly built bandstand where Mr. Era Parker, Ruth, Samuel, Ethan, and Lily were helping set out folding chairs for the children's spring music club. 5 German shepherds sat nearby, Atlas Juno Ranger Moose and Blitz poised yet gentle their eyes, following every movement of the people they loved. Ethan's hair gleamed in the morning sun. He stood protectively by his grandmother's side, while Lily, growing more confident every day, offered a supportive nod to her friend. Mary cleared her throat. Her hands trembled as she spoke, but her words carried in the quiet air. I owe all of you, and especially these children and their dogs, a great apology. Her eyes shone with tears that she no longer tried to hide. When I was a child, I was badly bitten by a dog. The fear never left me. And after my husband died last winter, the loneliness, it became so heavy. I let it turn to suspicion and anger. She paused, voice breaking. I was wrong. I am sorry for the pain I caused. Ethan stepped forward, offering a smile that was both forgiving and understanding. Ruth gave Mary a gentle squeeze on the arm, and even the dog seemed to sense the shift Atlas approached, wagging softly, allowing Mary to stroke his head for the first time. Lily's mother, Mrs. Evans, a soft-faced woman with kind brown eyes, handed Mary a handkerchief. We all make mistakes, Mary. Healing starts with the truth. Moved by the moment, Mary asked to join Ethan, Lily, and the dogs in their journey. She pledged to begin therapy, including sessions with Dr. Feldman and the Miller family, hoping to overcome her fears. I'd like to help if I can, she said. Maybe plant new flowers in the park this time with friends. The children grinned, and Mr. Parker, always the bridge between generations, clapped Mary gently on the back. The town's mood continued to shift. Officer Dempsey stopped by the Miller house to deliver good news. Cedar Hollow's council had voted unanimously to recognize Atlas Juno, Ranger Moose, and Blitz as official guardians of Cedar Hollow. The dogs received tags with their new title, which Ethan fastened to their collars with pride. Ruth and Samuel, now local heroes in their own right, received a letter from the mayor announcing a grant for home repairs and a small stipend to support the animals' care. The family's worries about bills and groceries eased, replaced by a newfound sense of belonging. Lily's friendship with Ethan blossomed. She visited every morning, sometimes bringing homemade cookies, other times simply her laughter and music. With Mr. Parker's encouragement, they practiced piano duets and composed their first song, A Gentle Waltz for 4 Hands, which they played at the Children's Music Club founded by Mr. Parker himself. The club, held weekly at the park, attracted kids from across the valley. It became a haven for music, friendship, and healing, where even the shyest child could find a voice. Samuel's health improved with each passing week, thanks to Dr. Feldman's careful attention and the constant companionship of Atlas, whose alertness made everyone feel safer. Ruth took up knitting again, making scarves for the children and matching sweaters for the dogs who wore them, with regal patience on chilly days. In the spring, Cedar Hollow's spirit of unity bloomed. Mary Turner, true to her word, returned to her beloved garden beds in the town park, not alone, but joined by Ethan, Lily, the dogs, and a handful of neighborhood children. Together, they tilled the earth, planting bright pansies, daffodils, and wildflowers. Mary smiled more freely now, sometimes even laughing, as Moose helped dig holes, or Blitz chased after the butterflies that swirled above the blossoms. Neighbors pitched in repainting benches, fixing the old gazebo, and stringing up lanterns for the coming summer festivals. Mrs. Martin, who used to fret at every change, organized afternoon teas, where townsfolk could swap stories and share advice. Even Tom Brooks, once the town's gruffest skeptic, began walking his old beagle alongside Ethan and Lily, always tipping his cap to the 5 guardians. The music club staged its first open-air concert on a warm April evening. Ruth and Samuel sat in the front row, flanked by neighbors and friends. Ethan played piano with Lily beside him. The dogs sat calmly behind the children, Atlas at attention. Mary, no longer afraid, stood among the young performers and read a poem of hope. The applause was thunderous. As the sun set over Cedar Hollow, people lingered to chat. Children played by the riverbank, and the dogs dozed in pools of golden light. Tansy, the tabby queen of the fence posts, watched the world from her perch tail, flicking contentedly. In time, Mary Turner's fear faded, not erased, but transformed by love, honesty, and the loyalty of those she once mistrusted. Cedar Hollow thrived not because it had no struggles, but because its people learned to face them together, united by the music of forgiveness and the silent symphony of trust between children and animals. True healing begins when we let go of old fears and choose understanding over judgment. Like Cedar Hollow, every community faces moments when kindness, honesty, and second chances are needed most. In our own lives, perhaps we all carry scars or guard our hearts too tightly. But when we open ourselves to trust forgiveness and the bonds we build, whether with people or animals, we find the courage to start again and help others do the same. What lesson from Ethan's story touched you most, or reminded you of your own journey? Comment below and share this story with someone who needs hope today. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories of courage and compassion. If you believe in the magic of second chances, let us know in the comments and stay tuned for the next chapter.